Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you, Republican women, for inviting me. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. A lot of accomplishments. I was probably the only guy in the back going, more, more, more. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be out. Glad to be free. So a few weeks ago, I woke up in this confinement center. I learned I could leave at 4 in the morning. So I woke up about 3:30. I had already cleaned out my locker, and so I went up to the front desk, and this groggy guy behind the counter, he's like, "What?" So I said, "It's time to say goodbye." And so he handed me a garbage bag. I took my sheets off my bunk bed, stuck them in the garbage bag, and then I left. And as I was coming out, there were actually some reporters there. And they were like, "How does it feel?" I said, "Well, I actually remembered something that Winston Churchill had said during the Boer War. He said, 'It is always exhilarating to be shot at without result.'" So, anyway, it's a thrill to be here. I'm going to kind of, it's been a very educational experience for me, 8 months kind of in captivity. And actually, for some of you, I probably should say a little word about my grievous offenses that led to all this. So all of this began in the year 2012, in which a college pal of mine, Wendy Long, whom I'd known for 25 years, was running for the Senate in New York. And Wendy had asked me, "Do you think I should run?" And I said, "Wendy, you're running against an entrenched incumbent and with a lot of money, and it's going to be very hard. Politics in New York, a very liberal state, pretty brutal, so I urge you not to run, but if you run, I'll try to help you." And so she decided to run. Now the campaign finance law has a limit, $10,000. You can give up to $10,000. So I wrote her a check for $10,000 for her campaign. But as the campaign went on, and then in the middle of 2012, Obama was running. I had my movie out, 2016. I was running a college at the time, so I was in a kind of frenzy. And Wendy kept calling me and saying, "Hey Dinesh, come speak at my fundraiser. Hey Dinesh, come meet these Indian doctors. I want them to support my campaign." And I was just, I felt frustrated. I was unable to help someone who was a close friend of mine. And so I got a cockamamie scheme, and I called 2 of my friends, including my assistant, and I said, "Hey, do you like Wendy Long?" And he goes, "Sure." So I go, "Listen, why don't you write her a check for $10,000 and I'll reimburse you." Now that is not permitted. That is a violation of the campaign finance law. I thought at the time it was kind of a clever loophole, but of course I discovered this was not so. Now, normally this kind of offense, now remember, I'm not a professional fundraiser. In fact, I've never given to a campaign before. Normally for this kind of offense, you get reported to the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. And the FEC has an equal number of Republican and Democratic commissioners, which is kind of intended to ensure balance or fairness. So typically they give you a fine equal to the amount of your violation, and sometimes they give you some community service. It's very rare for these things to be prosecuted, particularly when there's no corruption. In other words, in my case, I wasn't trying to get an appointment or buy influence, or I didn't have a company that had a business before the government. I was literally giving to a college pal. But the government, the US government, just put a relentless prosecutorial team against me with dozens of FBI agents, and they raided my bank accounts, and they began to read all my books, and they wanted to prosecute me to the full extent of the law. Now, to get a little bit of perspective, so I go before this judge in New York, and to get a little bit of perspective, just late last year, there was, believe it or not, another Asian Indian guy, like me, Campaign finance law appears to be our ethnic specialty, it seems. Anyway, this guy, his last name is Chotwal, and he's a big contributor to Hillary and to the Democratic Party. But he does it kind of for a living, and by that I mean he was found guilty of $180,000 of straw donations, meaning convincing other people to give and then he reimbursed them. And then he's quoted in the media saying, you have to buy these politicians. They'll never listen to you if you don't pay them off. And then as his case was going to trial, he was trying to convince the witnesses for the government to lie under oath. So he was convicted not only of election fraud, but also of witness tampering. $186,000 of straw donations, and his penalty came down. So let's just compare it with mine. I got 8 months in confinement, which is overnight captivity. He got no prison, no confinement. I got 5 years of probation. He got 3 years of probation. He got 1,000 hours of community service. I have over 2,000 hours of community service. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that, you know, the core virtue of liberalism, the core principle of the Democratic Party is justice. They're always talking about justice, right? Obama talks about the fair share. Hillary talks about social justice. Now, very often as conservatives, we don't see the full power of the idea of justice. By which I mean, we appeal to liberty. We believe in freedom. Now, freedom is a very important principle, but deprivations of freedom don't make your blood boil like deprivations of justice. If you saw something grossly unfair, it would actually disturb you more inwardly. And so we play the king, freedom, and the left plays the ace, justice. So it's their trump card. And their point against me now is always, you broke the law. And I'm like, yes, I broke the law. And someone who breaks the law should be punished. And I don't say otherwise. But justice is not just a matter of did he break the law, it's also a matter of proportioning the penalty to the offense. It's also a matter of making sure that people who do similar things, people who are similarly situated, are treated similarly by the law. So this is the point about what's going on. Now, the latest wrinkle in my case is that I'm proving to be a criminal who refuses to be rehabilitated. I'm apparently in need of very extended counseling. Now, all of this sort of started kind of benignly. The judge said, Mr. D'Souza, I'm really puzzled about why someone so successful like you and someone evidently intelligent would break the law. And so I'm going to send you off to therapy so you can do some self-examination. And actually, initially, I took it at face value. I thought, well, you know, we all could use a little bit of therapy. Probably deep down we're all a little bit nuts. And so I went through it. But as it unfolded, it seemed to take on a little more of a different cast, because a couple of months later, the judge is like, well, you're being examined by a therapist, but are you being examined by a medical psychiatrist? So then I took a battery of psychiatric tests, and it was read by a prominent psychiatrist in New York who said, well, this guy is perfectly normal. And then the judge said, well, but that's a psychiatrist in private practice. What about having him examined by a government psychiatrist? So I took another battery of tests, and the government psychiatrist proclaimed me perfectly normal. And then at the end of the 8 months, my therapist wrote the judge and said, look, we've been at this for 8 months. This guy's perfectly fine. I think it's time to end this therapy. And the judge said, I don't think so, because it may not be very well known, but I was a psych major in college. And so, anyway, the outcome of this is more therapy for Dinesh. And we'll see if it finally takes. If you see me lined up at the Democratic booth, Or if you see me insisting that you call me Caitlin D'Souza. You'll know it's worked. All right. Now, so I was actually quite elated at having escaped, the prison sentence, because that's what the government was actually trying to do to me, i.e. 10 to 16 months in a federal prison camp. And the judge said, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this confinement center. So you're free in the day, but at night you have to check in, sleep in a bunk bed. And it was a little bit unnerving for me because I didn't know what to expect. All my friends go, Dinesh, you were raised in India, it's going to be perfectly fine. Probably comfortable by your standards. And actually, to be honest, it was a little bit bizarre. I mean, it was like being back in high school, not only the bunk bed, but I had a kind of like a locker with a combination. The last time I had had a locker with a combination, I was in Arizona at the age of 17, having just arrived as an exchange student from India. I don't know if you know, but I was in Patagonia, Arizona, south of Tucson. That was my first year in America. In fact, if I may tell you a story about that, I was living with the host family. This was the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. And I'd been here about a month. I was going to public school, Patagonia Union High School. And my host parents came to me and said, Dinesh, your school is going to be having, it was the big homecoming game and so on. And apparently after the homecoming game was a homecoming dance. So they said, there's a homecoming dance coming up at your high school. Have you asked someone to go? So I said to them, well, I've only been in the country for a few weeks. I don't know anyone very well. I think I'm going to give it a pass. They were like, Dinesh, this is an American tradition. What are you talking about? You absolutely must ask a young girl from your school to go with you. And so I approached a young woman in my class, a blonde as I recall, and I said, would you like to go to the homecoming dance? And she said, sure, but I have to ask my parents. I will tell you tomorrow. So the next day I went up to her and I said, well, what did they say? And she said, who? And I said, well, your parents. And she said, about what? And as I stood there kind of taking in, obviously a very embarrassing situation, it suddenly hit me with incredible shock. I had approached the wrong girl. And so it was actually only many years later, reflecting back on my early experiences in the United States, I realized I was guilty of a very common third world fallacy, which is simply the idea that all white women look alike. So, anyway, so I'm in this confinement center, and as I said, I initially was quite relieved because I thought this would be a more benign alternative to prison. But had I gone to prison, I would have been in white-collar prison. And white-collar prison basically it's kind of like prison light. The guy you meet is like some dentist or a mayor or a doctor who defrauded Medicare. And it's actually non-violent people. But the confinement center wasn't like that, because in the confinement center, it's everybody who's done their prison term to transition them back to society. So, it's got drug smugglers, and it's got coyotes, it's got rapists, it's got the whole gamut. And for the first month, I was a pretty low-key guy. I didn't actually talk to a lot of people. I noticed that there was all kinds of there was a subculture going on in the confinement center. And in fact, I learned things like, even among the Mexicans, who were the majority, they were divided into what were called the South Side Mexicans, which are the American Mexicans, and the Mexicans from the Mexican side of the border, and they're kept separate in the confinement center because they evidently don't get along. So I thought to myself, I don't really want to have lunch with a guy and realize he's a South Side Mexican and then the other guys want to get me. So I'm just going to stay to myself. You know, when I was on Megyn Kelly, she's like, what are you doing in there? And I'm like, well, I said, you know, I'd start a gang, but I'm the only Asian Indian. I'd be the only member. I'd have to hold all the offices. So like I said, for the first month, I was kind of low-key about it. But after that, I began to realize that, first of all, a lot of these guys were coming and going. So within about a month or two, I was sort of like a veteran. People were asking me directions. And so that's emboldened me a little bit. I suddenly realized I'm kind of like an anthropologist in a strange land. Right? As a conservative, I'm finding myself in a place where there just aren't a lot of conservatives. I'm not going to run into Charles Krauthammer or George Will. So I may as well turn this into a learning experience and try to get to know these guys and figure out how they think. And actually, I have to tell you, 8 months later, it was a very eye-opening experience and actually taught me something very important, which I'm going to talk to you about tonight, about American politics. Now, one of the things you have to realize about the guys in the confinement center is that they live at the very elemental, basic human level. Their main topics revolve around food, sleep, sex, and money. And they don't really think about anything else. They live, you might say, at the ground level. The opposite, I mean, I have lived most of my life in, you may say, academic or intellectual environments. Dartmouth, you know, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institution at Stanford. So I'm part of this big intellectual debate about American politics. One of the things about the criminals is that, and this is how they even think about their own criminal schemes, because initially I thought that kind of like in the Shawshank Redemption, most of these guys would emphatically maintain their own innocence. I didn't do it. But in fact, what I found is that their view is actually a little bit more complicated than that. If I could summarize and generalize, their view is we did it, but we are the small fry. In other words, the reason that we are here is not because we're criminals, it's because we're extremely stupid criminals. And actually, this was an idea that resonated with me because when I thought back to my crime, I realized I am clearly one of the stupidest criminals in the history of American jurisprudence. Because I just made this movie savaging Obama. Obama had personally attacked me by name on his website, barackobama.com. The article was unsigned, but it was so bombastic, over the top, incoherent. I mean, it was signature Obama. I could recognize. So, and there are actually legal ways to give money. People go to fundraisers all the time and write a check for $25,000. Why? They do it to a PAC. So had I just called a lawyer, I was just very foolish about it. So like these criminals, their view is we're the small fry, we're in here, but the big criminals never get caught. They're out there, they're at large. And not only does the system never come after them, the system won't come after them because they actually are the system. And this got me scratching my head a little bit because, see, for most of my career, I've thought of American politics as a debate. It's a debate between two sides. You've got the Republicans and the Democrats. You've got the conservatives and the liberals. And the conservatives believe in one vision of America, and the liberals believe in another vision of America. And the conservatives believe in freedom, and the liberals believe in justice. And the conservatives believe in opportunity, and the liberals believe in security. And I've been part of this big argument about American politics about which set of values should take priority at any given time. Now, the thing I've got to tell you is that from the criminal point of view, all of this debate, all of this high-flown argumentation is pure bullshit. So from the criminal point of view, human beings are not primarily motivated by high-flown ideals. Humans are actually motivated by very primal things, like rage and lust and envy and avarice, and that those are the motors of American politics. But since those motives can never be said, no one who demands a pay raise goes, I'm an extremely greedy guy who wants more money. What he says instead is, workers of the world unite. Which is to say that people camouflage their motives in grandiose terms, but no clear understanding of American politics is possible, which doesn't lift the veil and look at the actual motives. Now, interestingly, the people who do look at motives are the liberals themselves. They are always attacking our motives, right? So if you ask the left, what motivates the conservatives? They go, greed, materialism, a zest for warmongering, a violent tendency that makes them constantly want to reach for their gun. In other words, conservatives are greedy, selfish, materialistic, militaristic, racist, sexist, homophobic. These are all attacks on motives. Ask conservatives about the liberals, and the typical conservative or Republican will say something like this. Well, I think that the liberals are well motivated. I think that they want what's best for America. It's simply that their policies upon examination don't work. In fact, Saul Bellow, the writer, said that the liberals have started the Good Intentions Paving Company. They've got good intentions, but the results don't add up. And so as a result of our diagnosis of them, we engage in what I would call liberal pedagogy. We're always trying to explain to them how the world really is. So we say, oh, Barack Obama, we've got to let you know that Putin used to be a KGB agent. We suspect you didn't know that. We're just pointing it out. We want you to know that those mullahs in Iran are really not our friends. And if they say that they want to get a nuclear weapon, they probably do. So you might want to keep that in mind when you're negotiating with them. And by the way, if you have confiscatory high tax rates, that's going to discourage people from working. And so as a result, productivity is going to go down. So we've been engaged now in this long-term educational project, and yet we never seem to be surprised that it never makes any converts on the other side. You would expect if our points are so lucid, the other guy would go, you know, you're right. But they never do. We are always educating, and no one gets educated. And what does that tell you? It tells you that it might be that you're going about things in the completely wrong way. It might be that this is actually not an argument about motivation. Imagine if there are a group of thieves who are coming to rob the bank, and you were to manage to have a conversation with them, let's say by phone, the night before they do it. And you say to them things like, bank robbing is actually a very antisocial activity. Because if you rob the bank, people are going to be unmotivated to put their money in a bank. And if people don't put their money in a bank, there won't be banks. And so you might want to consider your effect on, you might want to consider the macroeconomic effects of the heist that you're planning for tomorrow morning. Now just think of how unpersuasive this would be to the thieves. Because they don't really care what the macroeconomic effects are. They actually want money from the bank to be transferred to them. And that's their goal. And they're going about it in a very rational way. And you are the fool for trying to convince them of something that they will never be convinced about. Now, what does this actually tell us about American politics? So, this fall I'm actually gathering these thoughts into a book. It's going to be called Stealing America. So you see my bank analogy was planned. Stealing America. And I want to give you a little preview of how I'm thinking about all this. You'll notice that it's extremely different from a lot of the stuff that you typically hear about American politics. It's American politics seen from the ground up, not from the top down. So, in order to think about that, let's imagine a guy who's been working in an office building, adding up a bunch of numbers every day, morning to evening, or sweeping office floors, and he's going home in the evening, and he lives in St. Louis, or Cleveland, or Boston. He's going home, and he's got a tough life. He's having trouble making ends meet. His house is kind of underwater since 2008. He owes his money on his credit card bills. And then he looks around and he sees this restaurant with glass windows, and inside there are all these people. They're drinking wine, and they're eating big steaks, and limousines are pulling and stopping by, and pretty girls are going in and out. And he sits and he looks at the people in the restaurant, and he goes, what the heck? What did they do that I didn't do? Where's my American dream? And at this point, he begins to feel very powerfully, probably the strongest and most corrosive of all human emotions, which is the emotion of envy. Envy. Now, envy is the most secretive of all human emotions. No one admits it. No one ever says, hey, I'm really envious of you. No one even admits it to themselves. No one even looks in the mirror and goes, I'm super envious. Envy hides. And envy, by the way, is not the same as jealousy. Most of the other vices have some redeeming quality. Envy is often confused with jealousy. You can actually see the difference if you take, for just a second, think about Shakespeare's Othello. So, Othello, the hero, is jealous. Why? Because he thinks his wife, Desdemona, is being unfaithful to him. He's actually mistaken. She's not. But if she were, he would have a right to be angry. Why? Because jealousy is being angry about being deprived of something to which you do have a right. That's jealousy. Envy is being angry about being deprived of something to which you have no right whatsoever. So Iago, the villain, is envious. Why? No reason. Iago says of Cassio, a young military officer, he says, he has a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly. What is Cassio taking from Iago? Nothing. But simply by being who he is, he puts Iago in a bad light. And the point is not just that Iago, see, it's not envy when you want to motivate yourself. Iago doesn't say, well, I need to better myself to be more like Cassio. The guy standing outside the restaurant looking in, he doesn't say, you know what, those guys studied hard. They worked their way through college. They started their own businesses. They thought of stuff that other people actually want to buy. Let me do those things. No, that's not envy. Envy is, I would like to pull myself up, but if I can't do that, it sure would be nice to have that guy pulled down. Envy wishes the destruction of the other person, and that brings the envious man pleasure. Pleasure. So envy. Envy is often accompanied, not surprisingly, by hatred. So you not only envy the other person, but you wish them ill, and you begin to hate them. And you begin to hate them, and then, in a most surprising turn, you also somewhat begin to hate yourself. And this is a little puzzling. Why should an envious person hate yourself? And the reason for that is because of the kind of society we live in now. See, historically, people who were envious didn't have any kind of self-hatred. Why? Because basically their low position in life was established by lottery. If you were a serf in medieval society, you didn't have to actually hate yourself, because you say to yourself, look, I just got the short end of the stick. I'm a serf. That guy got the long stick. He's a count, or he's a marquis, or he's the lord of the manor. He was just lucky. I was just unlucky. But see, the guy standing outside the restaurant looking in, he might think one or two guys in the restaurant were lucky, but he also knows there are a whole bunch of guys in the restaurant who are there because they actually made their own success. In other words, they really did build that. In other words, they built it, and I didn't. They thought of it, and I could have, but I didn't. And then that little nagging thought enters my mind, I suck. And that's where envy merges with hatred and a certain kind of self-hatred. And who should appear galloping at this very moment on a white horse by a man merely identified by his name tag, which says nothing other than community organizer. And this man, the Obama type, dismounts and says to this guy, listen, you are sitting here miserable, self-loathing, self-despising, inactive, inert, useless. You're thinking of yourself as a loser. But let me reinterpret your condition for you. You're sort of seeing it all wrong. You're not actually envious of those people. You see, you're actually righteously indignant because they have actually been stealing from you. In other words, all the stuff that they have is your stuff in their possession. Now, it requires a relatively sophisticated apparatus to make this claim. And to Obama's unbelievable good luck, he has whole sectors of society that are just as resentful and envious as he is. Now, this takes a moment of explanation. Why would Obama, the President of the United States, be envious? Why would he be resentful? Resentful of what? Well, the thing about Obama is deep down, he knows that when it comes to the entrepreneurial society, when it comes to creating new wealth, when it comes to actually running a business, he's a complete loser. He's never done it. He has no clue how to do it. He has 40 ideas for how to share the pie, but no concept of how you get a pie or what makes a pie grow. He looks at a guy like Steve Jobs who makes the iPhone. I mean, Obama can't make an iPhone. He can't even put up a website. But do not make the mistake of considering Obama to be untalented. He's extremely talented, but he's not talented at that. He's actually a specialist in resentment. He's a resentment organizer. He's really good at it. What he knows how to do is to take the lowest of human motives and energize them, activate them, give them a certain plausibility, and then direct them toward action. Now, what's the action? The action is very simple. Listen, inert, resentful, self-loathing loser. I'm not asking you to become a Marxist proletarian, because then you actually have to go participate in a revolution, and that's too much effort for you. So don't do that. All I want you to do is vote for me. Because I've got a bunch of guys, and together we're going to go to that restaurant, and we're going to take all that stuff. And then we're going to give some of it to you. So in other words, Obamaism is based on the very solid political insight that any government that robs Peter to pay Paul can completely count on Paul's support. It's a law of economics and a law of human nature. Now, what we're faced with in this country is, if we step back and look at it in the big picture, we hear about all these ideas about America was founded for liberty, and America was founded for this, and America for that. But the truth of it is, before America, the main way that people acquired wealth was by stealing. Historically, the most admired and most successful people were thieves. There's a famous story told about, in Augustine's City of God, about Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great was informed that there was a pirate out in the ocean who was boarding ships and infesting the sea. And Alexander the Great sent his soldiers to go get the pirate and haul him before Alexander. And Alexander goes, "What's your big idea?" Raiding ships and infesting the sea. Where do you get that idea? And the pirate goes, well, I got it from you. He goes, I'm the small fry. Because I go and rob ships, I'm called a pirate. Because you do it with a navy and a huge army, you conquer whole countries and take them over, you're considered a great emperor. In other words, historically, wealth was acquired through looting. If you look at the borders of almost every country in the world and ask yourself, how do those borders get there? The answer is theft. Theft. So America is different in that it was created from the beginning as an anti-theft society. The core idea of America is that wealth doesn't have to be stolen, it can be created. Now, granted, there was wealth being stolen in America. Slavery is actually a form of theft. Lincoln actually put it very well. He goes, the essence of slavery is you work, I eat. That's slavery. Forcing another guy to work for you for free is stealing the wages you would otherwise have to pay him. But slavery was universal. The American idea was wealth creation. But it's important to realize that whenever you have a society, there's going to be a group of people who don't like the way that society is organized. And it's not because those people aren't clever. They're just not clever at doing the things that make that society succeed. They're clever at doing other things. So what I'm saying to you is that in this society now, in my opinion, there is actually under the surface, under, you may say, the bullshit, a brutal war going on between the wealth-creating class and an extremely powerful and clever class of people, many of them drawn from academia, from the media, and from the world of politics. And the issue is, who will control the levers of wealth and power in this society? For 200 years, it's been the entrepreneur. But now, this new class of people wants to wrest control from the entrepreneur. By the way, this class has no interest in making a single widget. They don't know how to do it. They don't want to go through the trouble. Their point is to the entrepreneurs, you make the widgets. Once you've made them, we'll come and take them. And so what these people want to do is steal the wealth of America. I don't mean that they want to take control of the government. I don't mean that they want to decide the policies of the Department of Education. I mean that they want to control the entire wealth of the country. Every industry, from education to energy to healthcare, every hospital, every doctor, every savings account, every bank, your tuition, the money that you save in your accounts, they want to control it, which is to say where it goes. In my opinion, this is the biggest attempted heist in history, because America is the greatest economic prize in history. And the heist is actually underway. It's going on. And the only question is, do we recognize it? Do we see it for what it is? And do we actually have to do what it takes to stop it? Now, because of time, I'll devote a few minutes to talking now about how to stop it and whether we can stop it. Someone actually said to me earlier today in the line, I think we're losing our country. And there's not a whole lot we can do about it. It's sort of been taken from us. And we are kind of powerless to stop it. Now, this is actually completely untrue. But there is an element of truth to it. Because what I mean by that is that our side, speaking now very generally, but speaking of the entire Republican Party, but not just the Republican Party, speaking of all the people whose wealth is being targeted for theft. All those people act as if there's no theft going on. They actually act as if everything is kind of normal. And they don't show any of the signs. I mean, kind of imagine if you were coming to Arizona in 1810 or in 1870. And you want to start a business, whether it's a sawmill or you want to start a store, but you know there are all kinds of gangsters in town, and you know that it is their stated objective to take your store, to take your sawmill. And yet you said to yourself, well, I'm not really going to be hiring any security. That's an awful waste of money. I'm going to be super prudent in the way that I organize my merchandise. This would be delusional behavior, because it would be utterly out of sync with the threat that not just your country faces. It's not a threat to Prescott, it's a threat to you. Now, to get a sense of what I mean by threat, you just have to actually follow how the other side operates, because their goal is not to take your income, it's to take your wealth. And they are super clear about this. They want to take your income. And by the way, I'll talk to entrepreneurs and they'll go, well, you know, with Obama, the top tax rate is 38%. He wants to bring it up to 40%. Maybe he'll get to 42%, but I can live with 42%. No. The objective of the progressives is to have marginal tax rates in the range of 80%. This is not my view. This is what they say. They want the tax on the last dollar to be 80 cents on the dollar. You earn the dollar, you keep 20 cents, they take 80. That's their theft in the name of justice. They've also realized that there's more inequality in wealth than there's inequality in income. And so now they're proposing things like a 2% annual tax on wealth. That means to aggregate your entire wealth and pay 2% per year on it, which would then dilute your wealth down and essentially get rid of it, which is their stated goal. Now, again, this really is the remaking of America. It's not being done because the liberals want to be like Europe. They don't want to be like Europe. They want to be like thieves. They actually want your stuff. They don't have an idea that things work really well over in Scandinavia. Let's all be Scandinavians and call ourselves Sven. No, that's not their objective. Their objective is to run things and tell you what to do with your money, and tell you what your kids should read, and tell you how you should practice your faith. They've got a pretty clear goal. Now, can we stop them? Years ago, when I was a student in college, one of my professors told me about the story about the lion tamer and the lion. Okay, so here's the lion, and here's the lion tamer. And the lion tamer has a little stick and he kind of twirls it around. And the lion obediently moves to the imaginations of the lion tamer. And the professor says, who is actually more powerful, the lion tamer or the lion? Obviously the lion. But in that case, we have a puzzle. Why is the lion so sycophantically responding to these little movements of the lion tamer? And the answer is that the lion has no idea of its own power. The lion thinks the lion tamer is more powerful. So here we are in America, and we are actually extremely powerful. If I just look at this room, there's enormous, simple, concentrated, potential power in this room. Is it being used? No. Or it's being used to a very tiny fraction of its actual influence. So what's actually happening is that we're losing because the other side is applying its foot to the accelerator. And we operate in a very sleepy, inert way in response. So ultimately, in a sense, we're to blame. We're not the perpetrators, but we are very strange victims who are almost collaborating with the people who are ripping us off. So we need to think about doing things more creatively and in a new way. I'll conclude with my own example very briefly. I used to be, for most of my career, a writer and speaker. In fact, speaking was something I did all the time. Now I do it very rarely. A couple times, I'm going to go speak after this to a bunch of students in Washington, D.C. But I've actually kind of remade my career and decided to move. I still do the books, I still do speeches, but I'm now doing movies. I'm actually building. I look at where the left is strong. They're strong in media, they're strong in entertainment, which is to say Broadway, Hollywood, the institutions of culture, and they're strong in education. They use those three huge megaphones as instruments of propaganda. We don't even seem to be really aware of that. Many times when a debate comes to politics, it's already been settled because the cultural fulcrum has already moved. A good example is the gay marriage debate. You notice there wasn't much of a debate. Why not? Because that debate had already been settled culturally, and politics is sort of downstream from that. So here we are, I go to Republican conferences, all the Republicans scratching their heads. Dinesh, tell me which candidate you support. Are you for Cruz? And I'm like, you are so out of it. You're fighting over here, and you have conceded the entire battlefield to the other side. They're occupying all the high grounds of the culture. They're setting up all their heavy weaponry. They've got all the big megaphones. And you're basically preoccupied with the question of, can we take the Senate? Yes, we need to take the Senate. You know, we need to fight for the presidency. But if we don't do things differently, we'll never win the presidency again. Our team will be obsolete as a team. We'll have to disband and create new teams. And this will all have to happen. And if you look at American politics, it's happened many times. Whole parties, the Whig Party, in the middle of the 19th century, just disappeared, just fragmented, and it was gone. So, we can win. But winning requires a new way of looking at things, a new way of using your influence, a new way of engaging the other side. Politics is something that they do for a living. We don't. The typical entrepreneur runs his own business. If you go and attack capitalism, he's speechless. He doesn't defend it. He doesn't defend the very system that made his own prosperity possible. He doesn't know how. And so, the aggression we're facing is a one-sided kind of aggression. And I've obviously experienced it now in a very interesting way firsthand, because in a way, when this whole thing happened to me with the confinement center and all, it kind of shook my patriotism, because I was like, I had been a believer in, you may call it, ideal America. You know, when I first came to Arizona, my host family would say to me, we want to take you to see the sights. We want to take you to see the Grand Canyon. And I'm like, don't take me to see the Grand Canyon. I do want to see the sights, but the sights to me are things like the grocery store. That's a sight. I love that. 17 types of cheese. So that was my America. And then I stand in a courtroom, you know, it's the United States versus Dinesh D'Souza. I'm like, wow. So my life sort of came full circle. So it's forced me to reassess, but in a way, it's one of the best things that happened to me. The judge actually said, I want to teach you a lesson. And I want to say to him, you've taught me a lesson, but it's not the one you intended. Thank you very much. Delighted to answer some questions, and I think we have a system for doing that.
Hello? They're on. Hello? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Dinesh. Everybody, thank you. Thank you. So here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to give you an opportunity to come up and ask Dinesh a question. I ask you to formulate your question. Please make it be a question and not a statement, and make it be something that's very quick so that we get to listen to Dinesh. We're going to have two. We have a microphone over there, and we have one over here. So if you'd like to come up, you're absolutely welcome.
First of all, my sincere sympathies for being a political prisoner in the world's greatest democracy. You are Mumbaikar, I'm a Delhiite, and I'm a proud American. And my question is, how do you think we can make a difference in Washington? The difference between the two parties is blurring, in my opinion. And we are all sold out to corporations, and an average working American is struggling.
The question is, how do we make a difference in Washington? How do we change the equation? Now, when we think about politics, it's kind of tempting to believe that what we are in search of is a leader who is going to tell us what's what and is going to actually point the path that we need to take. To my knowledge, except for the founders, never in American history has there been such a leader. In my own lifetime, there has never been such a leader, not even Reagan. I came to America in the late 70s, and I was at Dartmouth in 1979 as a freshman, and Reagan was a candidate at that time for presidency, and he was in New Hampshire. But if you watch Reagan very carefully from the early days, you would realize that what we call Reaganism, all the ideas of Reagan, the number of those ideas initiated by Reagan is 0. All of those ideas have been generated by other people prior to Reagan. And not only generated by other people, but they had been publicized and made into important ideas so that when Reagan came along seeking the presidency and was looking around for ideas that he could run on, he went, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one, and he labeled them Reaganism. The point I'm trying to make is that Reaganism must precede Reagan. So all of us who are sitting around waiting for Reagan have got to realize there is no Reagan like that who's going to come and tell us what to do. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen even then. So what actually needs to happen is that we have to come up with the ideas. We have to actually create institutions to get those ideas out there. We have to demonstrate the viability of those ideas. And then we have to hope that a candidate comes along who's extremely attractive and ambitious, who will look at our ideas and go, I like that one, and I like that one, and I like that one, and that will be our Reagan. And we will have created him. He will not be creating us. Now, the other thing that's happened since Reagan is that the political landscape has moved into the cultural domain. And so institutions like education and media and Hollywood are very important. As conservatives, we have megaphones, but they're quite small megaphones. Our megaphones are things like Fox News Channel and talk radio and Rush Limbaugh. Their megaphones are CBS, ABC, Harvard University, Stanford University, just about every elite university, Broadway. So they've got huge megaphones, and we've got small megaphones, which means we need to build bigger megaphones. Now the good news about building bigger megaphones, and this was a simple insight of the Fox News channel, is Roger Ailes came along and he said, listen, you've got 7 cable channels, and they all have liberal views. But the country is not 99% liberal. It's about 50-50. So if I create a conservative channel, I don't need to go around asking people for donations. It will find a big market. It will be extremely profitable. And the Fox News channel makes about $1 billion of profit a year. In other words, it succeeds in the cultural marketplace. Michael Moore is a complete moron. But I won't laugh at him too hard, because hypocrite though he may be, he succeeds in the capitalist marketplace. In the list of political documentary films, he has the most successful one ever made, Fahrenheit 9/11. In the top 10, he has 5. Now, admittedly, he's made 15 films, and so he's got 5 out of 15. I have number 2 and number 6, so I'm 2 out of 2. So that's how I've shifted my career to compete in the marketplace of ideas. And I'll go to investors and say, listen, I don't want you to give me a penny, but if you invest money in my film, I'll work really hard to make you money in the marketplace. You keep the profit and put the capital back, and I'll go make another film. I call it recycled philanthropy. The same dollar goes around the block again and again and again. So this is a creative way of trying to engage the cultural debate. But I'm only just getting started. Why? Because the gold standard of Hollywood is not Michael Moore, it's Steven Spielberg. Hollywood's real power is to make feature films and tell stories through them. We're not even competing in that domain, but we need to. The universities. We're not going to retake the universities. All kinds of conservative organizations are spending tens of millions of dollars. In my opinion, you may as well flush that money down the toilet. because it's money that is aimed at changing institutions that are not going to be changed. What do you do about it? Well, the answer is really simple, is you have to create a new thing that makes the old thing completely obsolete. Imagine that there's a rotary phone industry and it's extremely powerful, and you're trying to infiltrate the rotary phone industry by telling young Johnny, learn everything about rotary phones. No, don't learn everything about rotary phones. Make an iPhone. And the moment you make an iPhone, every rotary phone is obsolete. Nobody will want to use one again. So you have absolutely wiped out a whole power base of the other side because you've been creative enough to do something in such a way that's better than how they do it. The test of us winning in politics is to become more entrepreneurial about politics. Not just about to join existing institutions. Most of the existing institutions, in my opinion, are kind of sterile. They've reached their natural limit. They're not going to do all that much more than what they do already. So this is why I have been, and I don't know if I'll succeed, but trying to reinvent my career and go into areas that are virgin territory. To me, it's like the Wild West all over again, politically speaking. And what gives me confidence is that I'm competing with guys like Michael Moore. What gave me the idea of 2016 is if Michael Moore can do it, I can do it. Yes, sir.
Dinesh, not to put any pressure on you, but with your incredible insight, could you explain to us what has precipitated the rise of Donald Trump in the Republican presidential field, and how do you see a successful Republican nominee campaigning? Thank you.
Yes, well, so my mom's just turned 80 and lives in Mumbai, India. And you know, when you watch American politics from really far, it all looks totally different. For many, many years, my parents were really baffled by me because they weren't exactly sure what it is I actually did. And then every few years, my mom would call me to give an explanation for what's going on. So recently she called me and she goes, Dinesh, I know you're in the middle of all this and stuff, but can you explain to me, what is the core difference between the two parties in America? How would you summarize this to someone who's not involved in American politics in an everyday fashion? So I had to think about it, and I said, well, Mom, there are basically two parties in America. There's a stupid party, and there's an evil party. I said, I happen to be a member of the stupid party. But you should know that in American politics we sometimes do things that are both stupid and evil. And those things are usually called bipartisanship. Well, look, I'm actually being playful about it, but what I'm trying to say is that the Republican approach for the presidency, and in general for dealing with the other side, I must say I find unfathomable. Unfathomable. When I made 2016, so we tested that movie. We asked Frank Luntz, a pollster, to bring in independent voters. These were people who had voted for Obama in 2008, but they had voted for Republicans in 2010. They were swing voters. And they were Hispanic, they were women. We said, all right, play the movie. And then have them fill out a questionnaire before the movie and after the movie. We found that that movie, when you watch it, particularly with Hispanics, but also women, swung them violently anti-Obama. Because they identified with me, I was an immigrant, most of that movie is shot in the third world, they totally got it. So we basically had, you might say politically, a loaded weapon in our hands. And I went to every major Republican group and basically said, look, I am a small producer, I made this movie, it's doing really well in the theater, I don't need you to help me make money, I'm going to make money with the movie. But I don't have the ability to reach the independent voter. Mostly conservatives are going to come to the theater to watch the movie, but you do. And you have the names and addresses of every independent voter, and you can buy DVDs of this movie for pennies on the dollar and drop them in the mailboxes of every independent voter. And not a single organization did it. Why? Because they were all surrounded by consultants who were making commercials and making commissions on those commercials, and so they had absolutely no interest in doing it. In fact, they convinced themselves that movies don't convince anybody to change their minds. And then I would go to the donors who were giving money to these organizations, and those guys told me, because they had heard this from the consultants, Dinesh. One guy literally said this to me. He goes, Dinesh, it's a very good movie, but you take 90 minutes to make your point. Can't you make your point in 90 seconds? And I said, well, you're asking me, an immigrant from India, and the theme of this movie is to call the President of the United States an anti-colonialist, a fairly obscure accusation, which needs to be explained. And you want me to do this in 90 seconds? I can't do that. And besides, no one that I have ever met changed their mind about anything by watching a 90-second video. Now, I make 90-second videos. They're called trailers. I try to use them to get people to go see the movie. So I know how to make 90-second videos, but I'm not idiotic enough to think I'm going to get a person to change their life's direction by watching a 90-second video. And the fact that I'm talking to someone who's a major mogul of industry who's saying this to me convinces me that we're in far greater trouble than I had previously thought, not because of the other side, but because of our side. So this is a little bit of our predicament. And where you come in is that actually in this age of social media, where we all know people who know people, there is actually tremendous concentrated power in this room. In this room. To give you an idea of how that works, and very briefly because I want to take more questions. So, on my social media, on Facebook, I have 850,000 fans and followers on Facebook. I have 200,000 plus on Twitter. You might say, what does that actually mean? What it actually means is that on my Facebook, I'm bigger than CNN. Because if you turn on CNN right now, there are going to be about 600,000 people watching tonight. If you turn it on in the day, it's going to be about 400,000. So CNN, a whole network with hundreds of employees, is reaching that many people, right? The point is, if I can take my Facebook to 2 or 3 million people, my influence is going to be as big as a cable station. And I don't need to go buy a cable station for $800 million. I'm operating one for free every day. And no one's loyal to CNN. I mean, you may be loyal to Anderson Cooper, but you're not loyal to CNN. If Anderson Cooper moved to another show, you'd move too. Whereas the guys who come on my Facebook like me. They like what So my point is, my degree of influence over my audience is bigger. So what I'm trying to say is, in the new age of technology and social media, there are very creative ways for us to exercise power. There was a small group of people, some of them in this room, who, when Costco pulled my book from their shelves, basically took their Costco card, cut it, but the cutting is not the important part. The important part is taking a selfie while you cut up your Costco card, and then the coup de grace, to post that picture online and email it to the president of Costco. Because when that happened, the CEO of Costco, a billion-dollar corporation, which has brand loyalty like no other corporation, calls me up in a panic, puts me on a plane to go to Seattle, and breaks into tears claiming that I, Dinesh D'Souza, am destroying Costco as a company, single-handedly. Now, I'm not doing it. I'm actually not doing it. And that's what I said to him. I said, I'm not destroying Costco. Your own customers are upset with you because of the way that you have been acting. So the point being, this is real power, but it has to be mobilized in a laser-like way. A lot of times it isn't. That's how we can be more effective in a nutshell. Yes?
Thank you, Dinesh. Serge Montez, and my wife is one that dragged me to Costco. My head was hanging down because half of my clients were behind the counter as she was cutting her Costco cards. I run a small business. I have a family of 6 kids. I serve in my church and other community. I'm very busy, and I recognize the importance of being involved. but so many of my friends and colleagues, this silent majority who I know feels the same way that we all feel, just that their lives are full of other things. What can we do to spark these great people that we're surrounded by in our community to take some interest and become passionate about retaking our nation?
So two things. In the cultural sphere, I'm trying to partner with leading conservatives to create some new institutions in academia, in media, and in entertainment. In other words, there's great vulnerability on the other side if you have the eyes to see it. The other side controls the universities, but I wouldn't really want the universities right now because the universities are a crumbling behemoth, right? They're a crumbling behemoth, but they also have great prestige, right? My daughter right now is at Dartmouth. Why do I send her to Dartmouth? Because that Dartmouth stamp on her degree is worth a lot. It doesn't matter if she doesn't learn anything. I mean, for the record, she is learning. But it wouldn't matter if she wasn't. Because it's that valuable for her to go there. Now, so that being said, the strength that the left has is that they control many of the instruments of academia. But their weakness is that it's an unsustainable operation. It's extremely inefficient, it's low tech. Now, a lot of these, for example, a lot of the prestige universities are going into online, right? But they're going into online in a way that is destined to fail. Why? Because they don't want to give away their degree. So MIT has MIT Online. And you can go now, today, and watch professors of chemistry teach their class for free online now. But not that many people watch. And if you said, well, this is great, I'm not going to send my kid to college because they can learn everything that they have to from MIT professors online, and then having mastered that material, I want my MIT degree, but they won't give it to you. And they don't want to give it to you because the exclusivity is what makes MIT degrees so valuable. If they gave away 50,000 MIT degrees every year, it wouldn't be an MIT degree. That's their vulnerability. By that I mean that there's a whole new technology and they can't use it because they've got hundreds of millions of dollars invested in brick and mortar facilities that aren't going anywhere. They have to pay for heating plants and energy plants and dorms, and that's their business model. And their business model totally sucks. But they're invested in it, and they're going to fight anybody who comes in. So my point is, to answer your question, and it seems like I'm not answering a question, but I am, we actually have to figure out new ways to attack their business model at its core and bring it down. Hollywood has its own business model. Hollywood's business model is unbelievably bad. They rely on an occasional success to redeem all the bad movies that they make, and they keep making them. They don't stop making them. If a business was making products and no one was buying stuff at Walmart, Walmart would take that stuff off the shelf. But Hollywood doesn't operate like that. Hollywood puts all kinds of stuff on the shelf because they want it on the shelf. That's why it's there, even though no one's buying. They believe in it so much that they'll do it. So, short answer is, look, I'm not going to solve the problem overnight, but I use my own social media, my Twitter and my Facebook, as mechanisms to communicate with people. And I'm generating all kinds of new stuff and new ideas all the time. So as a starting point, even if you don't do this kind of stuff, it's kind of fun. And you don't have to do much. I'm a little bit like Obama on the White Horse myself. All you have to do is sign up for Twitter and sign up for Facebook, because that's my way to communicate with you on an ongoing basis about ideas for fighting this battle in a more creative way. So in a sense, that becomes a locus of conversation. I don't have to create a magazine, I already have one. And so by plugging yourself into it, you become part of that conversation. So That's a starting point. Politics is going to, it's not like we're the minority, the other side they don't outnumber us. They are outgunning us because they put more into it than we do. They care more than we do. It's more important for them to win than we do. It is for us. Literally, we'll have pastors whose very church is on the line, who say things like, I really don't know if I can get it. Even I'll go to campuses and say, how about if I debate a leading atheist on your campus, and let's invite students to come. This is a great way to expose people to Christianity who won't set foot in a church ever. And the Christian students will say to me, Dinesh, to us a debate is a little divisive. Because we would rather you come and initiate a dialogue. And I say to them, guys, I am. A debate is a dialogue in which your side wins. Right? So, we are in need of a little more militant conservatism.
We know that you're from another country originally. I'm from another country, the socialist country, California. Now, I've been to Imperial Japan, a socialist country. I've been to communist country, Vietnam. I've been to communist country, Zimbabwe. I've been to Thailand, an imperial country, and I know that there's a caste system all over the world. And since you and I both know that this is the first country that has a document that says with our First Amendment, I can open my big mouth and say we're all equal under God. And the Second Amendment says I can defend that truth. And what I'm finding more and more that people aren't understanding, we were not conceived with a capital crime, and we weren't born with a felony record. We don't have this going on in this country since our founding. A lot of people seem to be falling back on that. What are we going to do to help prevent that?
So the principles of the founding. We're conservatives. So who's a conservative? A conservative conserves. But what are we conserving? Conserve what? In many countries, conservatism is just conserving, you might say, tradition, the way things used to be. And that, to me, is a bit of a weak form of conservatism, because there are good traditions and bad traditions, right? Slavery is a tradition. So our conservatism is not based on just conserving the past. We're actually conserving a concrete thing. We're conserving the principles of the American founding. And the principles of the American founding are actually classically liberal. So we're actually custodians of a certain type of liberalism. And we're fighting a new type of liberalism that is redefining the meaning of the word liberal. For 130 years after the founding, no president dared to attack the founding. Even in the debates about the Civil War, the debates over what the founding meant. The Southerners said things like, we would never have joined this union if we thought we could never leave. Surely the founders never meant to force us to stay against our will. The first president to attack the founding was Woodrow Wilson. And he is, in a certain sense, the founder of modern progressivism. So what we're seeing now is an attack and a debate over whether the founding itself is the right way to build our society. And what you get from people like Obama and so on is a disguised attack on the founding and the founding principles. The founding principles cannot be restored, by the way, in the exact form in which they were implemented in the 18th century. But that's why they're principles. They have to be applied in new ways to new situations. And our job as conservatives is to figure out what that means and how we do that. The movie America was based on rebutting the most common progressive attack on the founding, which is that the founders said one thing but did another. They professed equality, but they practiced slavery. They talked about wealth creation, but they stole the whole damn country from the Indians. And so this attack is taught to our young people as the gospel truth. And again, before America came out, I think it's probably safe to say that where there had been articles defending America against these charges, but I defy you to name a public defense ever made of America against these accusations, which are of the most serious nature. No one is basically saying things like, well, America did not extend its equality equally to everybody. They're saying the whole country belonged to this bunch of guys, and you came and took it. Theft. You're the real thieves. And in that case, the progressives go, all we're doing is restoring stolen goods. So when I said earlier that the Obama guy is able to sell a song and dance routine to the man standing outside the restaurant, this is his song and dance routine. It's a pretty sophisticated one. It includes indictments about the Trail of Tears and the institution of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan and the war with Mexico, and on it goes. And my point is, for a long time, I mean, I would look for places where these charges were answered, and I'd be hard-pressed to find places where they actually were rebutted head-on, as opposed to things like, don't talk about that stuff. Why are we bringing that up? My ancestors were in Palermo at the time. All true, but see, the point is that if the wealth of America was stolen, and if that theft is simply passed down and down and down, if you have Nazi-stolen art in your apartment, and somehow got to you, you didn't steal it, but still it is stolen. It belongs to somebody else. And so if the owners actually make a legitimate claim, someone does have the right to come and take that art back and restore it to its original and rightful owners. So the only way to stop that is to be able to make the case that the art was not, in fact, stolen at all. Not just by you, by anyone. So that's the defense. And that's the art. So while I'm unmasking the low motives of politics, I'm not saying that we shouldn't engage the debate at the high level as well. It should be. But we should also understand that that isn't just what's motivating our adversaries. Okay.
Thanks for coming out, Dinesh. We really appreciate it. The co-equal branches of government for the federal government appear to be so far out of balance that I don't know if they can be recovered. Do you believe that local, like county and state governments standing up for their own rights is going to have an impact on how it goes? And if you do, how can we try to make that bigger here?
The question is about the very careful balance of power that the founders established. A balance between the federal government and the states and local communities, but also an internal balance within the federal structure between, for example, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary. Now, to my way of thinking, the real problem is not that the federal, the tripod is out of balance. If you look at it, the real problem is actually much simpler. Take the Supreme Court. What's the real problem? Is it that the Supreme Court does not have respect for the founding? They don't know how to read the original intent of the founding. They have the wrong constitutional interpretive. That's not the problem. Here's the problem. The problem is that when an issue comes up, their team can be counted on to vote for their side without fail. And our team is extremely unreliable. That's our problem. We are standing on, eggshells. Will we get Kennedy? This is our own appointee. Will we get Kennedy? Now that Souter's gone, we wouldn't count on Souter. Can we get Kennedy? Yes, we got Kennedy, but oops, we lost Roberts. The other side, 4 votes. Boom, 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 boom. Never fails. So what that tells me is that our team thinks it's playing field hockey. And their team is robbing the bank. There's a certain motivational clarity in what they're doing. And a certain, let's just call it amateurism on our side. Not realizing what the stakes are at all. So let's look at John Roberts for a moment. In the Obamacare decision, I concede that there is actually a conservative argument for upholding Obamacare. What is that conservative argument? It actually comes right out of Reagan. It's the idea that the judiciary should not be an imperial judiciary. It should defer to the legislature. We live in a democratic society, and the people, through their representatives, make laws. Obamacare may be the stupidest law in the world, but John Roberts didn't make it. We made it. We elected people in government. They passed that law, and stupid though the law may be, it was passed through the legislative system and signed by the president. And so John Roberts is being a good conservative in saying, it's not my job to undo this law, I'm deferring to the legislature. Where did he get this argument? Right out of conservative legal scholarship in the 1980s and 1990s. He was being a good conservative, intellectually. But if John Roberts were to step back and realize that we're basically in a knife fight with the other side over the future of the country, then this is not exactly a time for intellectual parlor games. This is a time to recognize that they rammed Obamacare through with one vote when they could, paying no attention to whether or not the American people wanted it. They played their cards as roughly as they could to get it in. We had the opportunity to stick our foot out and send them flying flat onto the ground. And instead we said, no, this would violate law school articles that we ourselves wrote 20 years ago. So we're not going to be sticking our foot out and doing that. We're going to be returning to playing field hockey. So there you go.
So these will be our last two questions. Dinesh has been going since 5.
It's a pleasure to have you here tonight. As a physician, I want to make one quick response to your most recent comment about Obamacare. And I actually think the problem was that we went to a gunfight with a knife. My question to you is related to the fact that my wife and I have a blended family, and we have 9 children between us. And I keep hearing you talk about influence. And our children go to school. My youngest is 28, and our oldest is 45. These are all very intelligent, amazing kids, but they've gotten a very slanted view of history and the country. And frankly, they've learned well the lessons that they've been taught, but what they're being taught is not the history lessons that we learned when we were children. So, and on top of that, they're paying a premium price for their education. So here we have these kids that go and learn lessons that are manufactured and taught uniformly across the university system, but they pay a premium for it. My question to you is, how is it that you suggest that we can alter the influence that these kids are getting as they go off to school?
The only way to do it is to create a new academic iPhone. And what I mean by that is to look. There's a whole generation of people going back to the late 60s who have now been indoctrinated in, frankly, a form of anti-Americanism. That has been the era in which they've moved. And they take it for granted. They don't even want to argue about it. And there's not a whole lot, I don't think, that can be done with them, because, at least if you can believe some research on this topic, it is that many people's formative years are between the ages of about 14 and 25. That's when they get their general orientation of the world. Many people lose their faith in those years. Why? Because when you teach your kids, they learn out of piety, and they follow what you believe. But at a certain point, as they go out into the world, they have to take the faith you taught them, and this applies to Christianity and to politics the same. And they've got to say, is my parents' faith my faith? Am I going to accept it, or am I going to modify it, or am I going to reject it? And you have to realize that when we send our kids off to college, we're sending them into an organized campaign of rejection. It's an organized campaign by very intelligent people who, while you're building your business all day, have all day to devote to teaching your kid to reject the values of his or her parents. That's their job. And that's how they see their job. Many of them. Not all, but many. And the great thing is they figured out how to get you to pay for it. So you have to admit, from an entrepreneurial point of view, we got to hand it to them. They've devised a super ingenious system. It's as if we convinced the liberals to fund their own destruction. Wouldn't we be super smart if we could think of how to do that? Well, I think we can do that. There is a way to do that. I'm actually going to try to do that. Now, the way to do that is to actually figure out ways to deliver education at a very high quality and at a very low cost. And if you did that, you would be making the whole existing system start to shake. Now, there's a beautiful paragraph. Henry Bessemer, who invented a new way of making steel. And there was a huge steel industry, very powerful politically, well-established, hundreds of millions of dollars. And Bessemer tested this new chemical method for making steel, and it was a very fragile experiment. He looked at the result, and it worked. It worked. And then he writes in his journal, he goes, in that moment, he goes, I could see in my mind's eye the huge steel industry of the world beginning to shake. And he goes, I could see that whole industry coming down, and nothing it could do, not all the money in the world. Why? Because he had a better way of making steel. End of story. All steel is going to be made this way from now on. It may take 30 years for the change to occur, but the better product is on the market, and people can see it. So, to us, to me, the way to deal with higher education isn't to do what all these organizations do and spend $2 million to endow a chair of free market economics at San Diego State. That's a lot of money to put one professor in a department where his influence will be circumscribed by 10 other guys who are going to sit on his head all day. Or send Dinesh to go speak on campus. I do that. But I'm not under any illusion. I'm hit and run. I'm in on Monday, I'm out on Tuesday. The professors live there. So I'm at best throwing little pebbles into a pond. But you can figure out a way, and this would apply to elementary and secondary school no less than to colleges and no less than to graduate school, to deliver the same educational product that's being delivered for 1/10 of the price. You crush the existing system. You just crush it, because everybody goes, why am I paying $40,000 a year, which is my life savings? Not only to promote values I don't believe in, but to get a kid who then goes to work at Starbucks. Can't get a job and is saddled with debt. And we're not even counting the national debt that's going to weigh on him or her at some point. So this is the kind of thinking that we need to do, because this is the way of not just bringing a gun to a gunfight, but actually bringing a tank to a gunfight. We just up the ante by just playing a different kind of game. And the left is not ready for it. Because they control the existing institutions, they're not likely to think in this nimble way. So we should use our own weakness as a strength and say, okay, we don't have all these investments and all this brick and mortar stuff. Cool. How do we take advantage of that? How do we create universities that don't need buildings? When we start thinking that way, we're playing a different ballgame. So ultimately, that's how we win. Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Dinesh. I'd like to thank you for coming to Prescott, and I hope you'll return in the near future. My name is Ed Wolf. I'm an escaped refugee from the People's Republic of New York, land of high taxes. But one of the questions that I have is that we have the Senate majority and we have the congressional majority, the Republican Party. And it seems that the Constitution is being broken and violated on a daily basis almost. And why can't this administration put a lot of the Obama administration in orange jumpsuits and fix that whole problem with our Constitution being distorted, raped, thrown apart, torn up, you name it. So I'd like you to speak to that. All right, thank you. So we have three branches of government.
the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The judiciary right now is a tie. It shouldn't be a tie. We've nominated the majority of people in the judiciary. The Supreme Court should be our team. It isn't our team. It's in the middle. The other side has the presidency. We have the two houses of Congress. Which is better to have? In fact, ours is better to have. Because in a democratic society, which is a society under law, our team makes the laws. If I could choose between the presidency and the Congress, I take the Congress. In the 80s, we had the presidency with Reagan, and they had the Congress. Who was better? They were better. And actually, Reagan was only able to get certain things in and not others because they ran really good block and tackle against Reagan in the 80s, Tip O'Neill. So our problem right now is not that we don't have the power. Our problem is that A, we don't know how to use that power, and B, we're not motivated to use it. And we're not motivated to use it even when we have the presidency. When we have the presidency, our approach tends to be, things are going really well if we don't do anything to make them worse. So, you got the feeling in the 8 years of the Bush administration that by and large people got up, they went to work, and if nothing happened, it was a good day. It was a good day. Now, with Obama, he gets up in the morning, and he basically thinks, how do I put a knife into the backs of the other guys? And I don't just mean the Republicans in Congress, I mean the Republicans in the country. How do I put a knife in their backs? And if I can't put a knife in their backs, I at least want to stab them with a toothpick. I want to do some damage today so I can sleep at night and wake up refreshed to do more tomorrow. That's how they think. That's not how we think. And so they get a heck of a lot done. They're using the power of the presidency by pushing it to the mat. We can stop them. The court can stop them. But neither of us are stopping them. We're not using our own power. Now, why? It isn't just because of Obama. It's true, there's a lot of fear of the first black president. But the fear of the first black president is really a fear of the media. It's the fear that if any congressman put his foot into the water, he would be crucified in the media. He would be relentlessly attacked on the front page of the New York Times every day for the next 6 months. He would be destroyed, and the mark of that destruction is his own colleagues would stop speaking to him. Other Republicans would denounce him. Republican organizations would not invite him to speak. In other words, he'd be crucified by his own side. And he knows that. And so he is not a fool, and so he's not going to do it, even though he has every power to do it. Our own side is going to nail our own guy in order to reduce the liability to our side, because the media is so powerful that if we embrace him, they will then attack us. So we have to savagely dump our own man and go weaker in the hope that it won't happen to us the next time. And that sends a message to all the rest of the guys to learn from that and never do that again, i.e. never use your own power or go out front because of what's going to happen to you. I am fully convinced that the problem with people like Boehner is not that he's a secret Muslim or he loves Obama or whatever. It's that he's absolutely terrified that if he goes into the crosshairs of the media, they will put bullets into him and he won't know how to respond. He will just be standing there embarrassingly babbling as they shoot him dead. He doesn't want to be shot dead, and so he acts like he's a dead man walking. Let me end by saying this. I mean, in some ways, I guess, I don't feel most of the time like I'm a normal Republican. Why? I don't know if it's because of my background as an immigrant. I don't know if it's because I was a rebel at Dartmouth. To me, I remember when I was 17 and I came on a plane that went over New York City. I could see the skyline of New York. I could see the Statue of Liberty. I knew right then that my life was going to be totally different from that moment on. And so America to me has represented a completely different way of conceiving my own life. I've talked a lot about wealth and stealing and money, but at the end of the day, it's about the chance to make your own life, to be the architect of your own destiny. And America certainly meant that to me. So then I find I'm in this political debate, which I thought was kind of a gentleman's game of chess, and I discover actually now is far more brutal than I previously thought. It's not brutal in the way that the Indian political way is brutal. In the Indian political way, they would have sent a bunch of policemen, and they would have beaten me silly, and I would be left in an alley somewhere. And that's third world politics. But American politics is not less brutal for being more subtle about it. It's also a rough game. But somehow over the years, I've developed a very peculiar temperament in which the actual brutality of this game of politics is, to me, extremely exciting and extremely amusing and extremely entertaining and extremely motivational. And so at the end of all that America has tried to do to me, the concept of being the daily nightmare of the Obama administration is even more so now than before my career goal. When they kept saying to me, "You're not being repentant enough. You're not being contrite enough." Initially, I tried to explain to them, I am contrite about what I did, but I'm not contrite about who I am. And I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I want you to realize that you've got a powerful movement and group here, just here in Prescott, in Little Prescott. And it could be the organizational nucleus for doing very powerful things. I've talked about one or two of them already. But I want you to try to think of politics in a creative way. What can you do? I mean, to give you an idea, people say to me, I go all over the country, they say, I live in Texas, I live in California, my vote is useless, what can I do? And I say to those people, I say, listen, I'm going to make a movie next year, which is an expose not just of Hillary, but of progressivism, and it's a secret history of the Democratic Party. The movie will actually be, it's going to blow the whistle on this whole operation. Now, you're in Texas, and your vote, quote, doesn't count, or you're in California and your vote doesn't count, but there are about 2 to 3 million voters in this country, and their vote will, in fact, decide the next election. So, I'll be putting my movie in 2,000 theaters, but it's going to come out in DVD 1 month before the election. Your $5 or your $20, which is of no use if you were to buy DVDs and show them to your kids. But if you could figure out a way to take DVDs of the movie, which are cheap to make and buy, and have them shown to swing voters in Ohio and in Florida, then you're showing them to the very people who will decide the election, and you in this room have a lot of power with a little bit of organizational ingenuity to do that. You don't actually need great institutions, you just need a little bit of savvy, a little bit of meetings, a little bit of organizational effort, and not even a great deal of cash to pull it off. And it's an actual way to do a lot of good with a small amount of dollars, because the product, which is the movie, I'm already making. I've already got investors to pay for that. I've raised $10 million to make the movie. So I'll make a really good movie. The product is already there. The only question is I don't have the ability on my own to get it to all the people who need to see it. But you can on your own, you don't even need me, to figure out ways to do that. So to me, that's a creative use of your resources. It's not a creative use of your resources to help Republicans defeat other Republicans. It's not a creative use of your resources to spend a lot of time fighting on trying to prove that Obama was born in Kenya. It's a little bit late for that. It is a creative use of your resources to say that we've got a lot of valuable information on Hillary. Americans need to know that, but most Americans don't live in the political world. I mean, when I travel I remember when my daughter was a teenager, I traveled in the car with her friends, and they would talk about things and play music, and I realized I don't even know what they're saying. I realized I was like a parachuter descending in a new world, right? And I was like, what's going on? And then I realized that for most Americans, that's politics. They're like parachuters, and they're like, what's going on? I have to vote. What's going on? We have to help them to figure out what's going on. And we have limited windows to do that. So those of you who are plugged in, who are informed, don't sit around scratching your head. Sit around scratching your head about how can I use the influence I have. Well, connect with me, please, because you can really help me multiply my influence. On social media, I had 20,000 followers on Twitter about a year and a half ago. I now have 200,000. My social media explodes because the more you help me multiply it, and it's free. I'm not asking you to do anything except share my stuff with everyone you know. And if they like it, they'll share it with everyone they know. Think of the multiplier effect. If you have 500 friends on Facebook, you share something I post, and all those 500 guys who have 500 friends on Facebook share it with their friends. That kind of advertising is of incalculable value in getting information out. Much more effective than any traditional channel. So forget the megaphones. We can build bigger megaphones, but we have to use our influence more. Not financial influence necessarily, although sometimes that's involved. But our influence of the people we know and the people that they know. So I hope this has been to you not just informative, but motivational and inspirational. I'm not saying our situation is good. To me, it's a little precarious. The American dream is, in fact, I think, at stake. But I do think that if we can use intelligent patriotism, we can figure out ways to turn this around, get our country back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinesh.